Hey, how's it going, guys? In today's video, I'm gonna go over prop design, and I'm actually gonna break this down into different parts. And the first part that I'm gonna cover today is gonna be more focused on reference gathering and sketching. And then the next few parts, we're just gonna be developing our idea further down. This is also part of a class assignment that I'm doing through Digital Vegetables, run by Kenny Vo. I highly recommend you guys checking out his live streams. It's filled with so much knowledge and it's amazing stuff. And so I thought I'd use this opportunity to try something new and also make a video about it, just so that I can keep this channel running. So pretty much I want to continue working on the mountain project that I was working on these past few weeks. Stuff that looked like this. It was kind of like the keyframe shot. And now I'm kind of using this opportunity to design one of these rock structures which have houses built inside of them. And when I first started my reference gathering, I wasn't really thinking a whole lot about storytelling. It was more just like finding cool stuff. The whole point of reference gathering is to figure out your problem and to solve it. And using these images as ideas and as inspiration. And so in my case, the way I broke it down was that, okay, I'm just gonna design these houses, where like these people live in. And I had an idea that, a single story house or building might look something like this. And then like a 2-story or a 3-story would be something like this, where it's like stacked on top of each other. We have some stairs as well. And then where we have multiple windows, it could be like maybe an apartment building of some sort where like people live here. And then this right here was kind of like my idea for like how the street would look like. And so the other thing that I was also looking at, okay, so what are the different textures that might be involved in this? So it was definitely, sand, desert sand, and then, rocks and, sand rocks and things like that. And I feel like it's always important to introduce some sort of culture when you're designing these environments. And for me, I wanted to dive a little bit more into the Middle Eastern culture / Islamic. I don't want to use a whole lot of Arabic language here, but more so like, these patterns up here. I feel like something like this and like this is kind of like the vibe that I'm going for. And then thinking about the people who live here, kind of like Bedouins, just out here in the mountains, living their own life. So that was the initial idea that I kind of had. So, and then I got feedback on this. And so we talked about, okay, everything looks really cool, but then why do these people even live here? Like, what's the reason for them to carve out houses inside of rocks instead of like just building normal houses, right? And so that was like the toughest part for me to try to figure out, okay, so why do they actually do it? And then the other idea that I got from Kenny was that, the structure that we were looking at, it almost looks like an explosion happened up here and then that caused this formation to come out. And so it'd be cool if like, what if like we come up with this idea where a meteor like hit up here and then an explosion happened, and then as the rock was expanding, it was turning into glass or something. And so something that's like very heavily influenced by Black Panther to some extent. Idea is kind of similar because in Black Panther they have vibranium, then it's like it came from like a meteor that hit the ground, whatever. Not gonna get into the lore of Black Panther right now, but I felt like it was a similar idea. And so I did like a second pass on my reference gathering. And so this is what I had. So when we're looking for designing a prop, right, I feel like it's always important to classify your big, medium, and small shapes, right? And so for me, it was like, okay, my big shape will be these mountains, and then the medium shape would be this element that I'm introducing in this world, which I'm naming Lorium. I don't know why, but the small part of this design would be like the engravings, right? And then coming up with an objective. I feel like the most difficult part when you're doing research gathering is trying to figure out what are you actually making, right? Because if you can't simplify what you're trying to make in like a couple of sentences, then you don't really know what you're making. So in my case, I'm using the idea that I want to design a house which is carved into these mountains, and it's one of the houses where a resident lives in. So the main idea is to kind of show how these houses, how these buildings are designed, and also showing how this element Lorium is being used actively in the design process, right? Like how are they using it to build their houses? The Middle Eastern culture, and then the location is desert, palm trees, dry vegetation. And then it's also important to think about what kind of tools they use to make all this, right? So I did a little bit of research on it. We got percussion tools and then abrasive tools. So going down this rabbit hole gives you the ability to make something that's a little bit more relatable, right? Because then people can actually see this and be like, okay, that's cool, and I understand why people did this. They won't get the exact idea about what you're making, but at least it'll look cool and it'll look more functional. And at the end of the day, it all comes down to like having a reason for designing something, right? Many times, myself included, I'll make something in 3D, it looks cool, I'll call it a happy accident, Bob Ross, and then I'll move on with life. But I've come to realize that happy accidents can only get you so far in life. Whenever I took the easy way out, took a shortcut and made something cool, when people actually asked me about it, like, oh, what were you thinking when you made made this, I was blank because I had no idea. It was a happy accident, right? So going into something like this with a better picture in your head using references is definitely a lot more helpful, because then you make decisions that are more thoughtful and something that's like more functional to some extent. And so I made, and then I also made like a notes section up here. It's kind of like I was just brain dumping here. I was typing stuff down. I felt like I don't type stuff down enough or write it down enough. Actually, it was on this piece of paper that I scribbled up and then I typed it on my reference board. But pretty much you want to be super specific with your references up here. Like I want to make this, and then this is the medium shape and that's the small shape. And then from here, I can then start gathering more references for my big shapes, for my medium shape, and for my small shape. And the main thing that I'm really interested is this pattern up here, right? I feel like it's going to blend in really well with the rock structures. Love this pattern. Hell yeah. And then I had to think about, okay, so why did they carve inside these rocks? What was the reason? Like, what was the reason for doing that? And so the idea that I have is that these people, they were already living inside of these rocks because they wanted to stay away from the rest of the world in a remote area, kind of doing their own thing. And so they had limited tools at that time and limited resources. And so it was a lot easier for them to carve inside these rocks instead of just like building like a whole city of some sort. And also these rocks, like the main inspiration for this came from Turkey, Cappadocia, something that I've been referencing for the past few weeks in my other projects. And what caused these rocks to be shaped in such a way is that there were a lot of volcanic eruptions that happened, and so because of that, these rocks were really soft and very easy to like dig into. And so kind of using that idea, okay, so that's why it was easier for them to kind of like just carve out these holes and just live in there. And then the idea that I wanted to have is that these guys, they wanted to live in secrecies, that they didn't want to attract a lot of people to their community. But then now they've discovered this element that's like really helpful to them. Their lives are changing, their world is changing a little bit, they're getting a little bit more advanced. And so the first step is them using it in building like more sustainable houses, like more sustainable living, and also using it as, I don't know why I wrote this, now that I think about it, use Lorium as protection for predators. I'm gonna remove that actually. I don't know why. Well, you can just be there. This was one of the thoughts. I'm like, okay, what if they're like predators up here and they can just use it for like as weapons or something, right? But then the main idea is that like this is a community that's kind of like moving away from their ways, from their early ways of just like doing things, the ancient way, I guess. And now they have this material and now they're gonna use it to like do more advanced stuff. And they're kind of like in this process of doing that. And so right now, the first thing that we're going to focus on is the house design. So I did go ahead and do a little bit of sketching as well. More like studies. It was kind of like this. Did a study of this structure up here, kind of just seeing how the sand is wrapped around. It's pretty much a mixture of a sand texture and a rock texture, right? So I was just seeing like the parts where there was more rocks shown, the part where like, a little bit of sand was shown. And then kind of seeing like how these balconies were made. I found like super interesting, that I can definitely use up here also. Just like random scribbling and some silhouette designs. And I think what I'm going to do next is that I'm actually going to jump into 3D Code and actually kind of try to like sculpt out some of it and then do a basic line drawing on top of it, just to kind of figure out what direction I want to take. And I'll probably do like a couple. I might do like 4 to 5 of these basic blockouts and do like line work on top of them, and see which one I like the most. All right, so pretty much I'm going to be doing a study of these two up here. And I'm going to try to be not as accurate as possible, but just like try to get the general idea down. And I'll also use a human scale as well, just so that I make sure I model everything to scale. So I'm going to use this cube up here and just go ahead and place it for now. As you know, I think it'd be cool if it's like 2-story, like one, like maybe the living room's at the bottom and then there's like a bedroom or something on top. I'm actually going to use my cut tool, Shift 3, to kind of like roughly get this sort of shape. And I can come here with like any of my brush tools. If I hold on Shift, I can smoothen out some of these edges. And I'm gonna grab my move tool next and see if I can use this brush right here. Get like a little more pointed edge. So essentially I'm just using this time to sculpt the general structure of this. And then let's go ahead and use these stencils just to add a little bit of noise up here. Use my build tool. So see how like get a little bit of noise up here, and probably just hit Shift 2. Click and drag on this, kind of add that detail real quick. And then the part where the sand is, I'm gonna try to see if I can like smoothen out those parts a little bit. A more smoother texture. Whenever there's rock, it's gonna be hard, grungy. There's sand, is gonna be more smooth. I feel like it's very heavily dense towards the bottom. Let's grab this. Grab the pose tool. Grab a section up here. Quite a little bit of cracks down here. And you can use like, make multiple selections with this. Just like scale it up a little bit so it extrudes outwards. So now we have like a more prominent texture difference now. And one thing I'm also gonna do is that up here, click on ignore back faces. And if you hold on control, you can deselect your selection, which I think is pretty cool. Maybe I should have like a ground plane as well. Let's use the 2D paint tool, and with this, what I can do, using the lasso, kind of like create these shapes, you know? It'd come up here, the cutoff. Let's cut it out a little bit. Make it more angular. Wonder if I can use like a texture brush with the move tool and see if that does anything. Let's see. Ooh. So if I use like this kind of thing. So there are multiple ways. It's kind of like similar to stencils. And then we can use the clone tool. Let's see clone. Just clone it up a little bit. And so now I want to think about like the opening up here. So for that, I'm actually gonna take this, make it a little bit bigger, bring this up here. And then what I'm gonna do next is click on subtract and hit apply. And oop, I fucked up. So it has to be on the same layer, my bad. Subtract, apply. There you go, yay. Here is our little hole. What I can do next is come back with the move tool. Actually sculpt out this hole a little bit better. Like kind of like do this kind of thing. Open it up a little bit more. And then there's gonna be like a door up here. I feel like for that door, I might just put in like a cube or something for now. In my sketches, I had the idea where patterns, those Islamic patterns. Let me see if I can find that image. And so I can like click this plus icon and then like add an image to my stencils. And so there you go. Let's scale this down a little bit. I think I like this a little bit more. But yeah, for example, so I did this, right? And then I can come up here and I think I have it on the same layer as the door. Okay, let me split this, put it on a separate layer. If you ever have something on the same layer and you want to separate it out and put it on a different layer, you can use the split tool for that. Change to rectangle. And now it's on a separate layer. I'm thinking that maybe this could be, you know, on the top here somewhere. Just move to and kind of like push it up a little bit. Just looks like a lot of noise right now. I feel like if I when I start texturing it, it'll read a little bit better, hopefully maybe. Let's see what the render looks like for now. Okay, yeah, so in the render, it looks a lot better. You can kind of like see the detailing to some extent. Now the next thing I want to try to figure out is how would I incorporate this element up here. So I was thinking that let me use this primitive model here. This looks like has like nice edges. What does this look like? What does this look like? So I'm thinking that what if this material right here is kind of laid out, essentially it's a gem, right? And maybe it's kind of up here covering the sides of it a little bit. Be generic. Something like this would be cool to look at. What if instead of like the engravings are carved in the gem instead of the rock itself? That could be something. I'm also thinking it'd be cool to have like a tarp or something kind of hanging up here, just for like, I know if you go up here there's like enough shade up here, but maybe another one kind of like just hanging up here. Let's see if we can make that real quick. I know there's like cloth simulation in 3D code. I've never really played around with it a whole lot though. So we shall see. Okay, I figured out how to do this cloth simulation. It took me a little bit, but it's actually pretty cool. So I wanted to create like some sort of cloth, like tarp of some sort. The way I did is that, let's actually make a new layer. I'm just gonna demonstrate that for you guys real quick. So I had this, I make these wooden posts first. Okay, the next thing that I'm gonna do is that I'm gonna click on this layer and click on cloth, and I'm gonna click on default cloth. So I get this default plane that has like a cloth simulation on it. And I don't know why this weird glitching is happening here. But let me make this a little bit bigger. And then kind of have to like play around with these settings here. I think by default the gravity is like 9 and friction is like 0.1. So I changed this to like 3 and 6 because I wanted the cloth to stay on these posts. What it was doing was like going through them. And so I'm gonna hit start up here. So nice. But for the most part, it does a pretty good job, I want to say. Does it do pause? And so, yeah, and that's how I like created this like effect up here. I just had like more subdivision. So when you click on end simulation, you have this piece now. You can subdivide it so you get like more smoother results. Maybe raise it up a little bit just so that it doesn't like go through that. And yeah, and that's cool. And then you just hit create cloth object, and then it's like a separate cloth object. Let's go back up here. I think I'm gonna cut out this shape here to make like a little balcony of some sort. I feel like I should make everything a little bit more bigger or something like this. So at this point, I feel like I'm making a 2-story house instead. But at this point, what I can do is then I can take this to Photoshop and kind of like sketch on top of it a little bit. I'm actually just gonna go ahead and just render this. You just change from sculpt to the render tab. Click render up here. And so now I'm inside of Photoshop, and let me remove this mask real quick. It actually came with like a background, so I have to mask out that background. And so now I can actually like start sketching on top of it and kind of like looking at my reference a little bit also, and see if I can find any opportunities where I can add more detail, pull away some details, and just, you know, brainstorm at this point. I wonder how I'll make this swirly pattern on these gems. I might have to use like a noise texture with something else, going against my 3D at this point. It may look like that I'm just tracing, but at the same time I'm also like mindfully trying to figure out how I would place these elements when I start building everything in 3D. And it's cool to have that kind of sketch aesthetic, right? It also helps you showcase your skill a little bit when you're making a portfolio piece, and show that, hey, I can do line work as well. Now I know in Blender there's a way to add line art using freestyle and also grease pencil. And so if you were making this in Blender, I feel like, you know, it would have been a little bit faster. But at the same time, whenever I tried using it, dude, like I never get like lines thick enough. So I still have to do like a line art pass in Blender anyway on top of it. So I haven't had a whole lot of luck with it, honestly. Alright guys, so this is kind of like the sketch part, and up here I'm not even gonna bother sketching that. I feel like I just like put an image up here kind of pointing to like the texture, but essentially some of the shapes that are going up here are something like more intricate. gonna paint back some of this on the mask. Actually, you can just make a selection. A little bit easier. Delete. Cool, and that's where that to see it. I still feel like it's very noisy, so I might end up just making it a little bit bigger. But generally speaking, this is kind of like a way of, you know, approaching your sketches with the help of 3D, where you spend some time on 3D and then you bring that in Photoshop and do like a line art pass. And then this could be like my my first sketch up here, right? So I might do 2, 3, might do like 5 in total. And actually, if you want to take it a step further, you could totally just make like a new layer, set it on overlay, and then just like paint the colors of your different materials up here. So in my case, I have the rock, the sand, and then the gem, the crystal. So I'm gonna choose different colors to indicate the texture difference. So yeah, so I think that's probably a good way to approach these sketches. And then the more ideations you're gonna do, the more studies you're gonna do, the better the whole thing's gonna look. So I'm just gonna repeat this process like maybe 4 more times, and then from there decide, you know, which one I like and which one I don't like. All right, guys, so that should be all for today. Thank you so much for coming by and watching this video. In the next one, I'm going to continue working on this project. And I feel like I'll probably make a decision on which design I like the most and then like further start developing that design. So definitely be on the lookout for that. And I hope you learned a thing or two from this. And before leaving, definitely subscribe to this channel. I feel like I've gotten a lot of new subscribers lately and it just feels amazing. So thank you so much for being here. And I'm just going to keep you guys posted. Definitely join our Discord server as well. But yeah, I hope you guys have a good one.